Welcome back to the Empire Builders podcast. Dave Young here, along with Stephen Semple. And as we record this, it is the
You're not
morning.
excited on this one.
Dude, come on. It's the morning of November 4th.
And what happens tomorrow?
Tomorrow, we have a little election in the United States. The topic that Stephen whispered into my ear just as we started was Twitter. Let's talk about Twitter. And I go to Elon Musk. I'm like, oh, God. So please, let's talk about Twitter, and let's talk about their origins and not their demise.
See, I thought you would be more excited because the real driver behind Twitter is a guy by the name of Evan Williams, and he grew up in Nebraska.
Did he really?
Yes.
I thought he was a New York City guy because he started it with an emergency alert.
Well, that's one of the things that like kicked it in the high gear. But no, he grew up in a farm in Nebraska.
Where? What town?
Oh, God. Of course you're going to ask me that. I don't know what town.
Well, because I know people everywhere.
I automatically assumed that you would know this part.
I didn't know that. But every Nebraskan knows someone who knows every other Nebraskan. That's just like it's a third degree of separation.
Right, but I figured in a place like Nebraska, everyone would know where this dude was from because of how big Twitter is.
No, I don't. Please do tell.
Okay. So the primary driver was Evan Williams, but also, Jack Dorsey and Noah Glass and Liz Stone played very, very big roles in the starting of Twitter. But Evan grew up, as I said, on a farm in Nebraska, and he wasn't into sports, but he always knew he kind of wanted to do a business. And because of that, he read a lot of business books, and in particular, he read some marketing books, and he decided he wanted to learn more because he read a book by a pretty famous marketing guy named Gary Halbert. And he said, you know what? I want to learn more. So he literally drove to Key West, Florida, and basically walked into Gary's office and said, I want a job working for you.
I'm telling you, that's a bit of a drive from Nebraska.
Yeah, it is. It is. So here's this farm boy from Nebraska showing up at Gary Halbert's office, and Gary basically gave him a writing assignment. Said, fine, here, do this writing assignment, see how you do. And it was so good. Gary actually thought he had someone write it for him. And he's like, no.
This is before AI.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, if it was written by AI, he wouldn't have accepted it. But anyway, that's a whole different issue. So Gary hires him, and he works there for about 7 months, learns a whole bunch of stuff, and returns to Nebraska. And he turns to Nebraska, it's the early 90s, and he decides he wants to start a website business. So he's trying to sell websites to local businesses. Now, at this point, he's in Lincoln, Nebraska. I don't know whether that's where he's from, but that's where he moved back to.
That's the big smoke. That's the Lincoln in Omaha. That's you're headed off to the big city.
Okay, so here he is in the early 90s. Remember what websites were like in the early 90s in terms of how many businesses even had them.
Yeah.
It's the early 90s. He's trying to sell websites to local businesses, Nebraska, and into the farm towns around Lincoln. And guess what? It was not working so well.
Really? I am aghast.
I know you are. So he's not paying the bills. It's not really working out. And he keeps hearing about all this stuff going on in the Bay Area, in the mid to late 90s. He's scared to kind of make the plunge. And his girlfriend at the time is moving to California, and he decides, what the heck? He would move out to California with her.
Here's the side note about Nebraska.
Okay.
This is the never-ending story. Anybody bright and talented from Nebraska moves somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Hence, you are in Austin.
I live in Austin. The state has more law schools and medical schools and dental schools than would ever be needed. It churns out more of those people than you'd ever need in a state of Nebraska. So they all just
you would just basically export.
They go somewhere. Yeah.
So it's 97. Finds himself in California, and no degree, some experience with basically failed businesses, and he gets a job at a company called O'Reilly Media, and it's a marketing company, writing copy, because of course he had the experience with Gary Halbert, right? But he discovers that he's not so good in the working environment. He does good work, but he's not a good employee, right? It's just sort of one of those scenarios that we often see with entrepreneurs, right?
Maybe a little neurospicy.
Yeah, probably. And while he was at O'Reilly Media, he started his own website and he started to post his thoughts and essays onto the website. Now, it wasn't called blogging at the time. It was just something that he was doing.
Blogging hadn't been shortened from the word web blogging, which was just basically keeping a journal on a website.
Yeah. And really, even at the time, what it was called was personal homepages.
Yeah.
So he had this personal homepage, and he even wrote one of his favorite posts, because he was saying not all of them were good. One of them was he did a post on why Amazon should not expand beyond books.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good advice. Nailed it.
But at the time, it took a lot of coding to publish something, right? Like you had to do it in HTML and all this other stuff. So he decided to create some software where it would make it easy to publish to a website. We could write something, push a button, and suddenly it's on the top of the website. And for him, that felt this really new and different. Felt like this new thing, this whole idea where you could go from thought to publishing to it being out in the world was really exciting to him.
Yeah.
So he left O'Reilly Media and he had met this woman, Meg Haranen, and they decided to start a business together. Now, he also got hired as a contractor for doing some things on the side, and they started this company called Piranha Lab. But he also continued to work on weblogging while he was doing this.
Okay.
Because he thought this whole weblogging thing could become a product. But in some ways, it was almost too simple. And he created a product called Blogger. It was at blogger.com.
Yeah.
And in April 2000, he raised $500,000. And if we keep in mind April 2000 in the tech world, that was right before the big tech crash.
Yeah.
Right. So in 6 months, they're out of money because they've been giving away the product for free. So in the fall of 2000, things are really tight. Software companies at the time, what they started to do were all pivoting to commerce solutions because this is how they figured they could make money, is suddenly pivot these things to business products. And they thought about this. Williams thought about this, but he didn't really want to build that. He was still excited about this idea that anyone in the world, this whole blogging stuff, could share their idea for people. And so they came really close to going out of business, was not able to make payroll. It's 2001, and he sits everybody down. He says, I don't have any money.
Yeah.
If we come up with some money, I can pay you. And so basically everyone left. But he couldn't imagine himself stopping working on this idea. So he finds himself by himself working on this. And in some ways, it's like I heard some interviews with him, and it was kind of interesting because in some ways it was a very lonely time. But in other ways, he found it very liberating because he could do just what he wanted to do. Didn't have to explain to anybody, didn't have to adjust it to justify it to anyone. And so he's working on this blogging product, and it's growing and things are happening. Then September 11th happens. And September 11th explodes blogging, right?
Sure.
Even with the .com bust that goes on, because all of a sudden people are like, what's going on? And they're discovering this whole idea of sharing their own experiences and all this other stuff. And that space explodes. And by 2002, he's able to start charging for the service.
Okay.
He starts taking ads because there's enough traffic that he can take ads. And then he sold the service where you could have this without ads being posted on your blogs. And he launched Blogger Pro. And the space is growing so quickly that in February of 2003, Google comes along and buys the company.
Yeah, and I think it's still a product in Google, isn't it? Yeah.
And this was the early days of comes across because literally
of
Evan Williams is one of the first people to do podcasting. Is Adam, right?
And this is the MTV VJ
first
guy.
Google acquisition that involved
so he's
people.
like sort of one of
all
the
the
first people to really
to this
get
point were
podcasting going.
Going. This was the first one that support it. Things along that line come and work. His
For
buddy
us.
Noah wants to do his own podcast.
Again,
and
it is an
exciting idea. So by
to Williams,
2004, he
it kind of
decides
fits
to
that
leave Google.
blogging
It's not
idea.
really what he
Sure.
wants to do. It's a radio show. It allows anyone to have a radio show. We now have a radio show.
Yeah.
But Noah keeps arriving on his doorstep saying, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? And so he finally decides, you know what? I'll build a company. I'll build a software platform that'll basically collect feeds and make it easy to not only publish a podcast, but make it easy for a podcast to be found, right? Make it possible. And so he builds Odeo.com as the company he starts. and they actually raise $5 million for creating this. And right after they launch, out comes iTunes.
Okay. Yikes.
Which basically obsoletes them. Right? Like all of a sudden you're like, well, that was such a good idea. Apple did it.
Yeah, Apple thought that was nice. Sure.
Stay tuned. We're going to wrap up this story and tell you how to apply this lesson to your business right after this.
Social post?
Yep.
Grinding it out?
Yep. Content treadmill.
Are you getting hearts and likes?
Sometimes, just a little bit.
You're consistent?
Daily, just like my coffee.
They're entertaining?
I think so.
So?
You think it's worth it?
Don't know. Ask the host.
This podcast host?
Yep. Oh, and you can book your free starter session on this podcast website.
Take it away, Dave.
Let's pick up our story where we left off, and trust me, you haven't missed a thing.
And so they've got this money. They're looking for other ideas. There's a young programmer there, Jack Dorsey, who is working at Odeo. And Jack, on the side, had wrote this installable podcatcher, he called it. And it was a service that could send a message.
Okay.
And it would, but what it would send a message to phones, but you could send it to multiple phones at the same time. Because again, you got to remember back in that day, if you were doing a text message, it was one text message at a time.
Right. There's no broadcast text.
Right. So Jack had created this idea where you could send it out. And the idea had actually come out of this thing that they did called one-day hackathons. Because when Apple launched iTunes, all of a sudden they were like, well, what are we going to do? So they just basically spent a day. Hey, what are things that people have been working on? What's an idea?
Yeah.
And Jack had come up with it. And they already had the idea that it was going to be called Twitter. That had come along with it, right? Just for whatever reason that fit with it.
Did they have the bird and everything?
I don't know. I just think it was, we're Twittering.
Yeah.
We're Twittering here.
No, I like that.
Right? It would have been really easy. This is one of the parts that I found that was quite interesting. It's a couple of things Williams learned in this is it would be really easy to dismiss this idea because it was really small, right? It was small, but felt like the right thing to him. And it felt a lot more important than the metrics. So even when they started rolling it out, it was not catching on the way everyone thought it would be catching on. Because by 2006, there were still only a few hundred on the Twitter site. And when Williams got talking to the investors, because remember, he had $5 million had been invested in it, they didn't really like the idea because, again, they're looking at the metrics, looking at the numbers, looking at the metrics. And so basically what Williams did was bought the company back from the investors.
Wow, okay.
He basically bought Odeo for Twitter back from the investors. Said, you know what, I believe in this idea so much, I'm going to buy it from you. And because what he found was, from a numbers perspective, he couldn't defend it, but just in his heart, it felt right.
Sure.
Right?
I get that.
So he went after it. And the other thing is, what he also discovered was the folks were far more interested in some other things that Odeo was working on, but it's not where his heart was. And it was not something that he was using, right? Because even when they developed the podcast stuff, feel is right for him because he wasn't a podcaster. Where this whole idea with Twitter went back to that original idea of you could create a thought and you could take it out into the world right away. So it's the end of 2006. It's definitely growing. There's now 60,000 users on Twitter, but that's still not a big number. And it's March 2007, and this is where they sort of get their breakout moment. And it's at South by Southwest.
Okay.
So they're at South by Southwest, and he feels like, you know what, that is our audience. People at South by Southwest are the ones who we believe would really love something like Twitter. And what he had noticed from being at previous South by Southwest, people hang out in the hallway. It's a lot of hangout in the hallway, a lot of chatting in the hallway, a lot of people trying to connect with each other and sharing ideas in the moment. And so he thought, well, why don't we set up screens in the hallway? It would just show the tweets scrolling by.
Yeah.
And it would be, tweets from one person to another person is what people would be seeing. And that's what they did because it was very engaging. There's a lot of journalists there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of bloggers there. People started talking about Twitter, and that basically hit a tipping point. It went hockey stick following that. Now, a lot of businesses, because when hockey stick, they had some scaling issues and things along that lines, right? And they now also had investors knocking on the door because now it was this thing.
Yeah.
And And then there was all sorts of drama. He and Jack Dorsey had a falling out. Jack became the CEO, but didn't have enough management experience. Jack was pushed out. Jack came back later. All sorts of things happened. In 2008, Facebook approached them to buy Twitter. And I thought this was really interesting because Evan Williams recommended not taking the buyout from Facebook. And here was his reasons. I think this is really, really good reasons when thinking about selling your business. Why would you sell? Now, maybe you just want to sell it. That's fine. Done with it. You want to move on, whatever. But basically, here's the reasons why you sell a business. You want to sell it. You're in trouble. It's no-brainer money. In other words, it's so much money it would be dumb to say no to.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't fit those things, you shouldn't sell it. And he looked at it and said, I want to keep doing this. We're not in trouble. It's a lot of money, but it's not no-brainer money. So we shouldn't sell.
Sure.
And I thought, when I read that, I thought, that is really good criteria.
It really is. There's a lot of small business owners that sell because there's a feeding frenzy of private equity money out there that let's not go down that rabbit trail. But yes, it ends up being what feels like no-brainer money.
Yeah, but if it is, but he's even okay with it. If it's no-brainer money, take the no-brainer money.
Yeah.
But what I love is make sure it's no-brainer money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So in other words, it's not a few $1 million. It's like life-changing.
Let's say Elon Musk comes to town and
and wants to throw like $44 billion is what Elon threw at the
turns out
company.
that's no-brainer.
That's no-brainer money. That's no-brainer money. Now, also by the time Elon came along, Evan Williams had been pushed out of the company.
Yeah.
Because there was all sorts of drama around the business, and then of course
guessing,
Elon comes and buys the company.
I'm guessing Evan's doing okay.
Oh yes.
I'm thinking he's probably just fine.
Well, if you think about it, like to the point, it wasn't until they had that breakout moment, he was the sole owner of Twitter.
Yeah, and then sold it. He's fine. I'm not worried about him.
He's fine.
He's a Nebraska boy. He'll be good. I got into Twitter so early that I am at Dave Young.
Wow. Yeah.
But I never got into it. Right. Like it was a service that never tickled my interest the way others do. And I don't know what it is about it, what it was. And I know other people that are just diehard Twitter people. And I could never Twitter.
You know what? I'm the same. I'm at Steven Semple. And I did it for a little while and it just wasn't my thing. So there's a couple of lessons out of this I like. But one of the things I'm going to say, I think Elon Musk changing the name to X was a massive mistake.
Of course.
And here's how much of a mistake it is. It's been quite a while now, and people still refer to it as formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah.
And here's what he didn't understand, and here's what we understand as marketers. The most powerful words are verbs, remembering things. And Twitter became a verb, tweet. What am I doing? I'm sending out a tweet.
There's no corresponding word for X.
Well, here's even the weirder things. The expression was, I've tweeted it out.
Yeah.
I'm tweeting something out.
Yeah.
Well, now it's, I'm Xing something out. Well, if I'm Xing something out, it means I'm removing it.
Yeah.
And we see it. The marketplace is still struggling with calling it X.
Yeah. Well, and even using it. Like I think if there was a viable thing that everybody could just jump onto, they would have.
Yeah.
It was pure vanity.
The part that I found that was interesting about this whole thing is it was this whole idea of feeling that he had that moment of being able to create an idea, share that idea with the world.
Throw it out there. Yeah.
That lived with him through all of these iterations that he went through that just felt so special to him. That's what he chased down. And there is something magical about
Absolutely.
that.
And it's you have an idea and you follow it.
Yes.
Right. You follow this passion for a thing that you have and just keep pulling on that string and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And other people comment on it. And it is this interesting idea that he chased down. And the other part that I found was he chased it down because it felt right. Even though the metrics didn't support it, it felt right. And it's always a hard thing because how do you know whether the right feeling ends up becoming something? You know, it can be a difficult thing. So I'm not saying completely ignore metrics, but also don't ignore the feeling. And then when he went South by Southwest, I think far too often when people are doing a trade show or whatnot, they don't have a strategy for the show. Like, what am I actually going to do? You know, most people like, I got a booth, I show up and I set up my booth.
Yeah, and hope that enough people come by to pay attention to me. But as you said, he did this because it's what he was interested in. And the thing that South by Southwest allowed him to do was find other people that thought that was a cool idea.
Yes.
Right? They're out there.
Yes.
They're out there.
Yes.
You know, like everybody says, there's no such thing as an original idea. The question is your idea powerful enough that other people are going to like it as well and want to make it part of their idea? They're incorporated into their world.
Yeah, exactly.
And he found those people at South by.
Right. And again, it wasn't just show up. It was like, what can I do now to engage these people and demonstrate it and meet them where they're at and do something unique to pull them into my
and
world?
Show, don't tell.
Exactly.
Let's
right.
show what people are saying on Twitter, not just say, oh, lots of people are saying lots of things. No, here's what they're saying. Look at this.
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. What a fun story.
I thought it was. Yeah, so you see, it worked out okay.
My angst is. I'm not saying all of my political angst is gone, but I'm glad that we didn't spend 20 minutes talking about Musk. So thank you.
You're welcome. My gift to you.
See you on the other side of the election, Stephen.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share us, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and leave us a big, fat, juicy 5-star rating and review at Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to schedule your own 90-minute empire building session, you can do it at empirebuildingprogram.com.